Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time a little bit something different. Normally I don't talk about TV shows, especially recent TV shows, but I saw all 9 episodes of this season, so I thought, why not give my thoughts on it? A lot of videos and a lot of stuff talking about this show is from a very political perspective, or people just really trying to talk about how offensive the show is or so on and so forth. And I just wanted to look at the season from a critical perspective, just look at each episode, give my thoughts on them, and my thoughts on the season as a whole, of whether or not I liked it, or I thought it was worth it, or I thought it was a good new season of a beloved series. And so without further ado, let's get started. Now, this is season 10 of Roseanne, and before this, there were 9 seasons, and the ninth season was a train wreck. The ninth season was Roseanne Barr's ego just getting way out of control. It just kicked into overdrive, and the show just went downhill fast. It was really, really bad. It's easily one of the worst primetime final seasons I can think of. It was totally against the whole spirit and the feel of the show beforehand. One of the big reasons why the show was so beloved by many is because it was a nice capsule of a blue collar family. And in season 9, Roseanne wins the lottery, so that completely ruins all of that. And then it just became Roseanne's ego just going all over the place. Yeah, there was even an episode where Steven Seagal was in it. She had all these celebrity cameos, and it just lost everything that made the show so loved by many. And to make matters worse, the season then ended on a really disappointing note that potentially nothing ever happened in the show. It was just a book that Roseanne was writing, and Dan was dead. It was that whole sort of bullshit, pull the rug out from underneath you, stupid twist that a lot of finales seem to do way too often. Like St. Elsewhere, oh, all these seasons of that show, that never happened. It was all inside the mind of an autistic kid. And here, it's like, oh, Dan was dead the whole time. It's just like, oh, fuck off. So I was understandably a little bit leery of this new season because of season 9. I was like, part of me was like, yeah, I wouldn't mind a new season retconning that. But I was like, I don't know. Last Roseanne season was pretty rough. But thankfully, this season brings things back to the show's roots and does a pretty solid job retconning season 9 and basically just saying it was just a story that Roseanne was writing, and Dan is not dead. He's been alive the whole time, and so on and so forth. Um, and I'm glad that this was a new season and not just a straight up reboot, because you could consider it maybe to be a reboot, but there are elements of it that are typical of a reboot, but it still has the original cast, and a lot of the original writers and some of the original directors from episodes from the show. So it's one of those things that it's kind of a reboot, but still, in essence, it is another season of the show, which is why it's labeled as season 10 of Roseanne and not like season 1 of some new Roseanne. Um, this show was a ratings giant this year. Absolutely enormous hit when it comes to the ratings. The first episode drew in a record amount of viewers, and it shows you that an old show like this still has legs. Especially when you bring back the original cast and you don't do it in a half-assed way. I gotta give this show credit for not bringing back the original cast members in some half-assed cameo way, like Fuller House did with some of the other cast members, or some of the other reboots that have happened in the past, or some of the other new seasons of a show that comes out years later. I would say that this is one of the better examples of a show when you have a new season that comes out 20 years later that I've seen. But it still has quite a few flaws and quite a few foibles and quite a few flubs and things that don't quite click. And overall, I thought the season was adequate and average and just okay. But that's better than I thought it was gonna be, because I honestly thought the season could have been a train wreck, because it's 20 years or something since the last episode was aired, and it's one of those things. It's like, how are you going to recapture the same magic? And it doesn't necessarily do that, but it recaptures some of it, which is more than a lot of new seasons of shows that come out years later can say. So it still recaptures some of the magic. And so yeah, this was a 9 episode season. I think it was originally pushed as 8 episodes, but then it was pushed to 9. And in the middle of the season, ABC renewed it for season 11 because it was a huge hit. I mean, the season premiere was watched by 18.44 million viewers. Yeah, 18.44 million viewers, and had a 5.2 rating in the 18 to 49 demographic, the highest rated Tuesday entertainment telecast in 6 years, and the highest rated comedy telecast on any night in 3.5 years since the Big Bang Theory. Some Big Bang Theory episode aired in September of 2014. So yeah, it was renewed actually for 11th season just 3 days after the season premiere. So the season premiere was such a huge, enormous success that it was immediately renewed. Um, and part of the show being okay is that it only has 9 episodes, and part of the reason why it's not worse is because of that as well. But it's one of those things that's like, the reason why it's not able to establish that much or really get that much into a lot of character development with some of the other characters is because it only has 9 episodes to work with. So I'm looking forward to seeing season 11 to see what they can do with some of the other characters and expand upon some of the things that were mentioned and brought up in this particular season. Apparently, my voice needs to be brought up. um, Welcome to puberty. But anyway, yeah, so yeah, it was 9 episodes, and it brought back the majority of the original cast. You have Roseanne Barr, who comes back as Roseanne Connor. You have John Goodman, who returns as Dan Connor. Laurie Metcalf as Jackie Harris. Sarah Gilbert as Darlene Connor. Lacey, I don't know how to say her first name. Leslie Goranson, who plays Becky Healy, Becky Connor. Michael Fishman comes back as DJ, and you have new cast members, and Emma Kenny, who plays Harris, who is Darlene's daughter. You also have Ames McNamara, who plays Mark, Darlene's son, and you have Jaden Ray, who plays DJ's daughter. And you also have Sarah Chalk, who was actually in some of the previous seasons as Becky, but she plays a different character named Andrea. And there's even a little gag where they kind of the two Beckys are together, and they're like, "Wait a second, don't I know you?" or something, and then there's this other thing where I think Sarah Chalk, like, her character tries to go up the stairs, says, "Wait a second, I don't live here," that kind of thing. So they kind of did they did acknowledge that, which I thought was fun. Judy Prescott comes back in a little cameo role as Miss Crane, as does Estelle Parsons as Beverly, who is Jackie and Roseanne's mom. Sandra Bernhard comes back as one of Roseanne's friends. You also have Natalie West as Crystal. And you even have Johnny Galecki, who is there as David, the ex-husband of Sarah Gilbert's character, Darlene. You also even have a cameo from Christopher Lloyd, who plays a character named Lou, who apparently Estelle Parsons' character Beverly is dating. And I was like, holy shit, Doc Brown! Like, what's Doc Brown doing in Roseanne? I thought that was kind of fun to see him in again. And so those are the main cast members for this new season. Uh, I would have to say Roseanne, she still has it. Like, she's still funny. I don't necessarily believe in a lot of her political viewpoints, but I don't watch the show or watch her for her political viewpoints, so I really could care less. She says some things I might disagree with, but it is what it is. It's one of those things that's like, I don't really have a political leaning. I'm not a part of the right. I'm not a part of the left. I'm not even in the middle. I'm not even part of a political party. I don't follow politics that much. I try to keep up on some things, and I have some opinions on other stuff, but I don't align myself with any political party. So I could care less what anybody really has to say about politics. Even if they say something that I don't particularly agree with, it doesn't necessarily bother me, because I'm not one of those people that has a team and then gets all riled up when somebody from a rival team says something I don't like. Um, and I felt that despite her own political beliefs, she actually is a big reason why some of the messages in this show get across so well. The fact that there are people who are being triggered by this show, I think is a good thing, because that's getting the reaction that the writers intended it for it to get. And for many years, Roseanne, she was a big reason why the show was what it was in the first place. She pushed for things like equality and talking about tough subjects in the previous series. She pushed for those things. Even when the networks were kind of trying to push back on her, she pushed back even harder and was like, no, we're going to have this in the show. And I really do have a lot of respect for her for that. And this new season is no exception. And she still has that iconic laugh and that really biting wit, and so it was really refreshing to see Roseanne again on network television, because she's a character that, speaks her mind, doesn't really care what anyone thinks about it, and it's a refreshing thing to see, especially on network television, to see someone like that again. John Goodman, he and Roseanne have their moments, but I felt that John Goodman's Dan was one of the biggest missed opportunities with this series, with this particular season. I didn't see the energy or the just the loving, not necessarily. I saw the love with the character, with his family and with Roseanne, but the energy and the wit and none of that's really there. And that's one of the things I was worried about with this new season. It would be like, oh, I'm gonna have to see sad old Dan, and I didn't really want to see sad old Dan. I was used to Dan being spry and full of life, and I still thought he would be that way, well, at least the best he could, even as an older man. And that just isn't the case here. It seems like a lot of the time John Goodman is just bored. He's bored with the character. He's bored with what he has to work with. Maybe it's the writing. Maybe that's why he doesn't seem like he's really into it. If that's the case, I don't blame him. I hope in the next season I see more of the Dan that I love and that a lot of people grew up with, that the dad that everyone really wanted to have. So it's one of those things that's like, there were glimpses of that Dan throughout this season, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of it. He seems to be like the elder statesman, and the happy-go-lucky Dan doesn't really show up that much. Some decent performances by Goodman at times, and the finale especially, but overall, I didn't quite recognize this Dan Connor. Laurie Metcalf, she does fine as Jackie, but she, like some other actors in this new season, took a while to knock the rust off. It was almost like she was overacting or wasn't. It was a weird thing, and it's what's interesting is she had been acting in films before this, so I don't know why her performance came across so in the first few episodes. But I would say that she eventually picked it up, though. But it's one of those things that's like you haven't played the character for so long, so maybe that's a bit of it, just kind of knocking the rust off. But Roseanne didn't seem to have any issue whatsoever knocking the rust off when it comes to her performance or with the character. And I don't think John did either. It's just like I said, I don't think he was given that much to show his energy or to show the Dan that a lot of people know and love. So I don't know if it's entirely his fault. There were some moments like with the ham in one of the episodes, and there's a few other things, but like I said, there really wasn't a lot of it. Um, but Laurie Metcalf, she's there. But I don't know. I think her performance definitely is good. I hope it gets better in the next season. Because started out kind of rough, and then it got to the point where it was all right, it was there, but I don't know, it just seems like she's just trying too hard. Um, Sarah Gilbert though steals the show. In a lot of ways, you could argue that this is her show. This season is her season. Um, she's the most compelling character. Sarah Gilbert is actually one of the producers of the show, and her performance is great. I love this character. I've always liked Darlene, and whenever she has her nice jabs, she still has that wonderful sardonic, uh, absolutely charming sarcasm. She still has that in spades, but there's a lot more to this character now. She's grown up, and there's a lot more weight to her and what's going on with her kids, and there's just the whole scenario where she ended up separating from her husband David and ends up moving back in with her parents, and it's one of those things where it's like sometimes going home isn't always the best thing, and she realizes that her dreams of being a writer and all these other things, her grandiose dreams of what her future would be, just didn't come to fruition. So I mean, it's a very adult thing for a character who was a lot of people remember as being a kid. Uh, Leslie Goranson as Becky, she's another actress that really was rusty. And I felt later in the season, in like the last couple episodes or so, she got back up to speed. But early on, it was almost like a high school play with her performance, and the same thing with Laurie Metcalf. It was one of those things that was like, with especially with Leslie, it was like what maybe it's because she hasn't really starred or done that much acting before now, so maybe that's why. But I thought her performance was honestly not very good early on, and I have to be honest. Michael Fishman, he didn't have that much to do with DJ. He came back from the war. I like the whole bit where they mentioned that he could not go back to another tour of duty because the military refused to let him do it, and dealing with that drama. But overall, like, he's not in the show that much, and he doesn't do that. He doesn't do a whole lot. I gotta give the actor credit though, when he does his magic show in the final episode of this season, he does recapture that impish spirit that he had when he was a kid and starring in the original first few seasons of the show. But performance wise, it's fine, but it's just another character that's not given that much to do. Emma Kenny as Harris, she does a good job playing a spoiled kid, spoiled brat. Other than that, there's really not a lot else with this character. I think she has she has some good chemistry with Sarah Gilbert, but she's not really explored that much except for like maybe one episode. Ames McNamara is the same thing. He was this big deal. He's a gender fluid kid. He wears dresses, and he wears all these different clothes, and he wears nail polish, and he still identifies sometimes as a man or as masculine, or identifies as female or whatever. And it's supposed to be this groundbreaking character, and other than one episode, they don't really focus on him that much. He just gets lost in the background. And Jaden Ray, it's like she might as well not even be there. She's just, in a lot of ways, she's just Janet Jackson's character in The Cosby Show. She's just there to look cute and say a few lines here and there and do some cute things, and that's it. I don't really have much to say about that character. Sarah Chalk, she's fine as Andrea. It's a character that's created for some of the earlier episodes when Leslie Goranson's character Becky, she's trying to get money for surrogacy, so she's trying to be a surrogate parent, and Sarah Chalk's Andrea is considering having her baby, with inside the whole surrogacy thing where Andrea is gonna put her egg and all this other stuff into, or not her egg, but use her husband's sperm, and have the surrogate parent kind of thing. So have Becky have her child, but then you find out, of course, that Becky's too old and she's not able to do it. So then Sarah Chalk's character just disappears after that. Estelle Parsons does not look a day over like 60 or 70. It's amazing. She's 90 years old and like she looks the same as she did in like season 9, or it's the craziest thing. She looks the same as she did when the show ended. Her character, there's an episode, it was one of the weaker episodes of the season that she's given most of the screen time. And a lot of the focus on the episode is around her. Natalie West, she's has a few scenes here and there, but she's fine. Johnny Galecki I thought was great as David in his episode, and but yeah, that's really your cast. I just wanted to kind of go and give my thoughts on the cast and their performances throughout the season before I did a little rundown of each episode. So now we're getting into the rundown of each episode. So the the pilot episode is called 20 Years to Life. It's directed by John Pasquin, and it's written by Bruce Rasmussen. And in this pilot, Darlene, she divorces David. She moves in with her parents. With her are her and David's 2 children, their adolescent daughter Harris, and a preteen son named Mark. Darlene initially claims she returned to care for aging parents, but eventually admits that she did that because she lost her publishing job in Chicago. She reunites Roseanne with her sister Jackie after the long feud over the 2016 presidential election. This particular episode is not one of my favorites. I felt that it was kind of clunky. It's kind of very iffy start to the season. I know it was watched by millions of people, but other than the message that the episode had, which is a message of respect and tolerance, which I really liked. I liked the message that it had, that you should not put a wedge between you and your loved ones because of your political beliefs or what you believe in terms of politics. And I thought that was really a poignant message. And I thought in today's day and age, a lot of families are dealing with this. They're still dealing with this. The whole strife within the family because somebody's a supporter of Trump and then someone else isn't. And then this constant battle back and forth. And it seems like there's a loss of respect for one another. And then there's other things where some family members and friends are completely separated. Long-time friendships and relationships are just completely broken over just petty political bullshit. And I like that this episode pointed that out. And it was like, hey, you don't need to be like this. You can learn to agree to disagree and still be close with one another. Because who cares about the politics? I mean, family is more important than all of that. Becky, she's widowed because her husband died. She works as a waitress at a Mexican restaurant. Very different. Like, she has tattoos and everything and all that. And she's an alcoholic. She announces that she's going to be paid $50,000 to be a surrogate for a childless couple. The mother is going of the wife in the whole childless couple situation is Andrea, played by Sarah Chalk. But Becky has told the couple that she is about 10 years younger than her actual age, so there's that whole sort of thing. And Roseanne does not support her doing that, so there's that drama. DJ, he's a military veteran. He's married, and he has a young daughter, Mary. His wife Gina is also in the military, is serving overseas. You don't see a lot of his wife either. She's in it for a little bit, but did you see like one or two maybe scenes with her, and that's it. See, this season you brought in these new characters, but they didn't really have that many episodes to really get the new audience up to speed with them, or give them more depth. And so what you're left with is a lot of the older cast. We're catching up on them after all these years, and that's honestly what I wanted to see more than the new cast. But you're not really giving the new cast a fair shake or a chance to really uh, gel with the old cast, or really gel with an audience. Um, but yeah, the first episode, there were some funny gags here and there, but a lot of it was political barbs and stuff, and I just was not a big fan of this one. I liked the message it had, but overall, I thought it was pretty forgettable and not really that funny. See, there's another issue that this season had, is that it was sporadically funny. There were moments where it would make me laugh and laugh hard, but then there'd be other moments where I just wouldn't laugh at all, and I just thought it was sad. So, yeah, it's one of those things where hopefully the second season, I mean the second season of this new version, like season 11, uh, uh, amps up the funny. It goes in a more lighthearted territory and cuts down on the politics. Gives us more of the family dynamics with the Connor family that we're looking for. That a lot of fans of Roseanne want to see. Then the second episode is called Dress to Impress. It's directed by John Pasquin, and it's written by Darlene Hunt. And this one mainly is Mark's episode. Dan and Roseanne, they have issue with Mark wearing girls' clothing to school because of this whole thing. If he goes to the school, he's going to get beat up. He's going to get bullied. Mark gets into trouble after displaying a knife that Dan gave him because Dan was trying to tell him, how to be tough and all of that, and so on and so forth. And then Mark later admits to Darlene that he was being bullied because of the clothes that he was wearing. Andrea then interviews the Connors to learn about their genetic history before proceeding with Becky as her surrogate. And that does not end well. Well, I mean, it does. Well, it doesn't necessarily. I mean, they still try to string this along that maybe she will be able to become a surrogate, but yeah, they learn about the genetic history, and there's this whole sort of thing where it's this drama about Becky wants the family to look cleaned up and everything, and cleans up the house, and there's some fun little stuff, like there's pictures of the family, and there's a gag that I cracked up at, and it's like, I want to take down these photos. These are from when you were fat, and he's like, and then Roseanne's like, but that's the only time we were happy. So there was some, I definitely do get a kick out of some of the moments in this season, and that was one of them. And Dress to Impress, I thought I liked it more than the first episode, but you could tell it was still trying to push some message or something. And the main reason why this episode existed was to show off the new character in Mark, and to try to display a message of tolerance for his creativity and for his gender fluidity. And there was a nice moment in the end when Roseanne pretty much gives the students in Mark's class the business kind of thing, where it was kind of just telling them that I'm a witch, don't get on my bad side type thing, let him be what he wants to be. But yeah, it was one of those that, and then it's just the family, Dan and Roseanne, they learn to accept the kid for who he is, and it's a message of acceptance, and it's a nice one, and I'm glad that the show did that. But after that, Mark is barely in any episodes and doesn't have that much to do. So it's one of those things. It's like, has this episode, you establish him as a kind of very interesting character, with the definitely a unique problem that a lot of, I don't know if it's a problem, but it's a unique situation that a lot of that there actually are more young kids are dealing with nowadays, and they don't do a lot with it. In fact, they go into cliche territory later on, which I was disappointed in. Then you have the third episode, which is called Roseanne Gets the Chair. It's also directed by John Pasquin. The direction in these is fine. I would have to say throughout this whole season, the production quality at times is kind of cheap. Other times it's better, but yeah, it's not, and it's not like the original show was like a big budget production, but I mean there are some moments where it looks really cheap, like the Roseanne's supposed to be a Lyft driver or an Uber driver, and there's a shot where you can clearly see that it's just Roseanne Barr and some other people in a fake car, and then they have like one of those green screens in the background to substitute the background when they're driving around, and I'm like, you didn't have the budget to actually have these actors in a car and drive around. I mean, come on, like that's super cheap. And I like the fact that it's shot in front of a live audience, and maybe that's why they couldn't really do that, because it's shot in front of a live audience. But that's one of those things that it's nice to see again, but is it really necessary? And the laugh track, it's one of those things where it bothers people, but I'm so used to it that it just becomes background noise. So it didn't necessarily bother me that much. But anyway, going back to the third episode, directed by John Pasquin and written by Sid Youngers. This one deals with Roseanne and her whole issue with getting old. Dan installs a chairlift for her on the stairs, but she doesn't want to use it because it makes her feel old. Dan and Roseanne criticize Darlene's parenting because she just seems to just let her daughter act like very disrespectfully and careless around the house. Harris hogs the washer and dryer with her clothes, not allowing Roseanne to do her laundry. And then there's this whole thing that blows up where Darlene discovers that Harris has actually been selling stolen clothes on Etsy. And that's when Harris admits she's unhappy living in Lamford and wanted to earn money to move back to Chicago. And there's a nice drama here. And I know there was a lot of very controversy here when Roseanne takes Harris, calls her a bitch, basically calls her a spoiled bitch, and like sprays her with the it's like a water sort of gun kind of thing. And it's one of those things like in the sink, you have like the spraying thing, and she dunks her head in and sprays her. And I thought it was a crowd pleasing moment, and a lot of the audience laughed, and I thought, sometimes maybe somebody needs to get a little bit wet. It's not like she actually hit her or anything or smacked her around, but I know a lot of people point to a moment in one of the earlier the seasons before this when Roseanne actually went and hit one of her daughters, and then she regrets it because it reminds her of what her mother used to do to her. And so a lot of people are retroactively looking at that, and they're like, well, why would Roseanne do this to Harris? It's not really her character. And it's one of those things, take it up with the writers. And also Roseanne Barr herself is so involved with the production of this. If she had an issue with it, she would not have done it. And I didn't think it was that hurtful. Like she sprayed her with some water. She didn't smack her around or anything. And she had a lip, and she was very disrespectful. And sometimes you need to be kept in check. But yeah, I mean, I like that episode more than the previous two. Then the fourth episode is called Eggs Over Not Easy. It's also directed by John Pasquin. It's written by Morgan Murphy. And this one deals with Andrea and Jackie. They go in and are there with Becky to go to her surrogacy medical appointments. That's when the bombshell is dropped that Becky has a less than 5% chance of conceiving, which is a pretty big bummer. And then Darlene helps Becky comes to terms with her problems. And some of the strongest aspects of this season and the show so far, especially with this rendition of the series, is the dramatic moments between Becky and her sister Darlene, when they put aside their differences and just learn from one another. Like that's some of the strongest parts of this show, and that's definitely on display in this episode, where Darlene helps Becky come to terms with her issues and her inability to move on after Mark's death. Um, and then there's this whole sort of shenanigans with Roseanne and Jackie trying to get a rescue dog that Becky adopted, but she had to return because of reasons, and it's there. I like Roseanne gets to chair better, but I would still say I liked it more than the first two episodes because of the really poignant moments between Becky and Darlene. And then in episode 7, you have Darlene versus David. This one is directed by Gail Mancuso and written by Bruce Helford. And this one is really pretty sad. But I would say, I don't know, it might be my favorite episode, or one of my favorites for sure, because I really like Johnny Galecki's performance as David. I thought it was some of the best acting I've seen from him in a long time. And this deals with David. He left Darlene and the kids to do humanitarian work overseas with the Peace Corps, and he returns to Lamford for Harris's birthday. He tells Darlene that he's moving back permanently, but he's met someone and he wants a divorce. And he and Darlene, they spend the night together and they decide to get back together again. But Darlene reconsiders after Roseanne and Becky point out that she and David are incompatible. And this is a very heart-wrenching episode, but it dealt with some real drama and some real emotions, and the performances are all great. And on top of all of that, there's crazy shenanigans and crazy shit, like Beverly arriving at their doorstep because she was expelled from her nursing home because she was having sex with too many of the residents and was spreading STDs. Which you're like, whoa, like really? Like this whole drama with this bombshell that Darlene is realizing that, I love David, but we can't be together. It's not going to work out. And having that final realization, and oh, look at mom, she's being weird, she's being kooky, she's a sex kitten going around and banging all those people at the nursing home. It's just kind of like, okay, all right. It's a very crazy juxtaposition, that's for sure. And that whole thing ties into the next episode, episode 6, called No Country for Old Women. This one is also directed by Gail Mancuso and written by Dave Kaplan. And this one deals with the whole stress over who's going to take care of Beverly. So as Roseanne's like, I don't, she takes care of Beverly for a little bit. And then eventually they come up with a plan that they're going to switch mom out. So 1 week Beverly's going to live with Roseanne, and then another week she's going to live with Jackie. And then Bev's nagging just sets them all off, and Bev moves into Becky's apartment. Becky then wants to move to her parents' house after discovering Bev having sex with an old man, which is crazy. Which is, I think it might have been Christopher Lloyd's character. And because originally she was doing this whole thing where she's all like, I want to do what's right for my grandmother and help her out. And then I think it was either Jackie or Darlene or somebody was like, she doesn't have any money. It is like, oh man. Then there's like these more there's some bonding moments with Jackie and Bev, where Jackie saves her mom from a half-hearted suicide attempt. She admits that her life is better by having her mother in it, and she wants Bev to stay with her. And then you have there's this other subplot going on in this where Mark is helping Dan build a birdhouse for a client, which is one of the neighbors, but he went a little bit overboard with the creativity, and Dan didn't appreciate it. And Dan gave him some good advice. He's like, sometimes you got to follow the rules. When somebody tells you that they want something a certain way, then you got to do it. And then Darlene comes in later and tells him that he needs to find the balance between playing by the rules and being creative. And so he does that. He does another birdhouse. And he just decorates the inside, which I thought was fun. And there was a nice message, but that's all you really have with Mark there. And that was an episode 6. He was a big part of episode 2, and then throughout a whole bunch of episodes, he was barely in any of them and didn't do that much. Um, so yeah, I don't know what else. Are they just gonna make this character just a token character who, whenever they need to bring out some LGBT kind of thing, they're just gonna bring this character out or something? I don't know. I mean, hopefully the new season after this, season 11, fleshes out this character more. But yeah, No Country for Old Women, other than the stuff with the birdhouse and Mark and Dan and Darlene, I wasn't a big fan of the stuff with Bev and all of that. It was nice seeing Christopher Lloyd, but that was arguably the weakest episode out of the entire series. It's this entire season, not entire series of Roseanne, but this entire new series and this current season. Then you had episode 7 called Go Cubs, and this one really lit off a firestorm of controversy. This one is directed by Andrew W. Wayman, and it stars and it doesn't star Dave Kaplan. It's written by Dave Kaplan, and this deals with Dan and Chuck. They lose an important drywall contract because their client hires a company using legal immigrants. And I actually admire the guts of this show to actually go there. A lot of the media and a lot of things have tried to put in this thing that illegal immigrants are only taking jobs away that Americans don't want to do, like maid work and cleaning the toilets and working on farms and all of that. But that's not entirely true. There are a lot of trade jobs that are being taken away from American trade workers because these clients are going with illegal immigrants to do drywall, to do construction work. And I'm glad that the show actually brings that up and isn't just putting its head in the sand and going la-di-la-di-la and acting like it doesn't happen. Because it does. And that's a problem. And I don't think that's right, especially, taking away jobs that Americans would not do. I can maybe give that as pass. But when you're taking away jobs from experienced tradesmen, and that's just fucked up. And also, it's equally as fucked up to see companies go with the cheaper option and go with illegal immigrants and take money away from the hardworking American tradesmen. It's one of those things that's like, fuck you, businesses. But I mean, I'm not surprised because businesses do that shit all the time. They're shady as hell. If they can save a penny, they're going to do it. So, but yeah, it's an issue that I don't know how they're going to fix it, but I'm glad that the show mentions it and doesn't ignore it. And that, of course, lit off some firestorm and articles written about it and people misinterpreting it and trying to be like, oh, all legal immigrants are bad. And that's not, I don't think that's really what the show was trying to say. It was saying that illegal immigrants who take jobs away from tradesmen, American tradesmen like Dan Connor, who is a veteran drywall guy, takes jobs away from them and affects their bottom line and affects their way that they can pay the bills and still stay afloat. That's not cool. And the Connors are struggling financially because of this, because of the whole thing where he loses the drywall contract, which results in their Wi-Fi being cut off. And this causes an issue because Mary's supposed to Skype with her mother, who's serving in Afghanistan. And this is where Roseanne overcomes her prejudices, and she actually asks her new Muslim neighbors for the Wi-Fi password. Because earlier in this episode, she assumes they might be terrorists because they bought like a whole ton of potting soil, and she gets their attention. DJ confides to Dan that he's having some difficulty adapting to civilian life after the army denied him another tour of duty. And yeah, she actually does. She overcomes her prejudices, Roseanne. She gets a Wi-Fi password. And Mary is able to talk with her mother. And there's even a great jab at the end when Roseanne, she goes to a store and she meets up with the Muslim mother there, and the Muslim mother is not able to pay for all of her food because there's this dumb thing where apparently you can't pay for like uh roasted or like grilled chicken or something, whole chicken, because it's a luxury item. You can't pay for that with food stamps. And I didn't know about that. That's pretty awful. And the checkout clerk lady, she's being a total racist bitch, and Roseanne calls her out, and it's a great moment. But then the media gets a hold of this, and they just start just railing the show. People writing articles about it being xenophobic and racist, and pointing out the prejudices. Not necessarily pointing out. I mean, the whole thing where some people are doing just really stretching things, like going as far to say that, because Roseanne actually changes her ways and calls out the racist checkout clerk at the end, it still doesn't make it okay. And I'm like, what is it supposed to do? Like, I mean. Oh, and even they're like, even pointing out some of the xenophobia was not acceptable. Like, how are you going to fix something? How are you going to fix a problem if you don't show the problem? Like, some of these people writing these articles are just assuming that, if you don't mention the xenophobia, if you don't mention this, then it's going to fix itself. And that's not going to happen. I hate to break it to you. There are racists in America. There are people who probably watch the show, or other people who are watching this video maybe, who do have those beliefs. And the only way to get them to think differently about it is to show how wrong that is. And you can't do that without showing it. And I don't understand the whole like, they learned their lesson and that means that it's okay. No, they learned that it's not okay. Roseanne learns that this idea that her Muslim neighbors are terrorists is not okay. She learns to become more tolerant and becomes a better person in the end. How is this a negative? How is this a bad thing? I don't get it. I don't understand. And because of that, that was one of my favorite episodes of the season as well. I thought it had a nice message, and I liked a lot of the fun stuff too, like Roseanne and the rest of the kids and Jackie and company. They have like an indoor slumber party. I thought that was fun, where they put up they have like sheets up and they have the couches set up, and it's like they make a tent inside, and I thought that was pretty fun. And so that was one of the better episodes for me. Go Cubs. And then the next episode is episode 8. It's called Netflix and Pill. This one is directed by Andrew D. Wayman, and it's written by Betsy Borns. And this deals with Dan and Roseanne's 45th anniversary. After their dinner, DJ and Darlene point out to their parents that their credit card has reward points. Dan discovers that they have enough for one night at the Radford Suites and a honey-baked ham. Now, this is where the old Dan showed up for me. He's talking about the ham and all of this, and it was a lot of fun to see that. And they go to the hotel, but they can't have the room because of some bullshit rule where they are required to register a credit card to pay for incidental charges. They weren't even planning on doing anything. They weren't planning on getting room service. They weren't planning on doing any of these things. But since they gave the card and the card was declined, they can't have the room. And I'm like, that's just wrong and stupid. And I don't understand why that rule exists. But then they decide to come home and they decide to enjoy the ham. And this is where Dan realizes that his wife is a pill addict. She's way out of it. She's just totally just drugged out of her mind. And he confronts her about it, and Roseanne's like, well, most of these pain pills, they're gone. I got rid of them. And then Dan discovers that she's been taking far more than the prescribed amount, and has actually been collecting and hiding other people's leftover medication. And this is this opioid addiction thing is a big thing. One of my aunts, like, she's really big into opioids, and there's other stuff. It's like, it hits home for me because my aunt, and it's interesting. I see a lot of my aunt, a lot of Roseanne in my aunt, and my aunt, her name is Jackie, so it's like there's Aunt Jackie in the show, but she's totally different than my Aunt Jackie, and my Aunt Jackie's more similar to the character of Roseanne. You know, they're very similar. Like I believe she did vote for Trump. She's brash. She says, she says what's on her mind, and she's not afraid to do it. But she just like Roseanne, she has a really big heart, and her and I have always had a good relationship. Um, and so it's one of those things that's like, oh man, like that really does hit close to home because I know she has a lot of pills, and I know she takes a good amount of pain pills, because she's in a lot of pain. She's diabetic and she has problems with her knees and all this other sort of stuff. So it's very similar. Like so. But a lot of families can agree, can attest to that, the similarities. The stuff with these really intense opioid addictions in their own families, with their grandmothers and or their grandparents or their own, or their or even kids. It's a big problem, and I thought the acting was great in this between Roseanne Barr and John Goodman, and this is a really a very intense moment for Dan and Roseanne. And Dan basically says, schedule the surgery because, you're not going to be doing this anymore. And she's like, but Dan, we can't pay for it. The copay costs $3,000. And he's like, just schedule it anyway. Crystal retires from her casino job with full benefits, and she offers to recommend one of the Connor girls as her replacement. Darlene initially declines. She considers it an unsuitable career move, but Dan actually urges her to take it to keep her children. And not to keep her children, but to help her children. And then the conflict arises between her and Becky, and Darlene then ends up taking the job, but ends up offering Becky a career suggestion. And that's another great bit between those two, when they have this sort of mutual understanding and so on and so forth. And the other career suggestion is Darlene's like, hey, go to college. You still have plenty of time to do that. And the finale of the last episode is called Knee Deep. It's directed by Gail Mancuso, and it's written by Bruce Rasmussen. And this one, this is pretty heavy. There's a flood that hits Lanford. It fills the basement of the Connor house with water. Dan estimates it'll cost $20,000 to repair the foundation. Because of this, he regretfully tells Chuck that, well, actually, he later, earlier in the episode, he ends up, only way I'm going to be able to pay for my wife's surgery is by hiring these illegals to do the drywall job. And he tells Chuck that that's what he's doing, and then that causes strife between him and Chuck. And I like that Dan has to make some really tough decisions here and go against his morals and his beliefs in order to try to keep the family afloat and to keep the house and everything. And it's some very real drama, and not just some of the type of stuff you see on a sitcom. This is some real deal type shit. And Roseanne and Jackie, they look for some items to sell to help pay for Roseanne's surgery. They find this old creepy doll that their mom used to have and try to bring it in. They look it up online and see that it's worth a lot, and they bring it into a doll store, and they find it was repaired, so it is not worth nearly as much. And then they come home and they realize, there's this flood going on. How are we going to pay to fix the house? How are we going to pay for Roseanne's surgery? And the Connors end up finding themselves rooting for the governor to declare a state of emergency, because if he does that, according to the show, this episode, they can then collect federal funding to conduct needed repairs, and then Dan says he can do the labor himself and have enough money left over for Roseanne's knee surgery. And I don't know if that's necessarily true, but hey, it's a sitcom, it's not necessarily reality, although it does have some definite reality to it. And then Darlene utilizes Becky's advice for getting better tips at her casino job, which really disgusted her because it basically is like compliment the guys, deal with the guys, and kind of deal with a little bit of sexual harassment. That's pretty much what it's insinuated. What's insinuated. And then the end of the episode is the family prepares all of Roseanne's favorite foods, and she has like 7 minutes to eat some of it because she's not supposed to eat anything after 8 p.m. that night. And the federal funding provided a bunch of jobs for construction. So Dan and Chuck form a partnership and mend their broken they're not really broken, but they're fraying friendship after Dan decided to consider doing cheaper labor. And that's the end of the season. I thought this episode was a strong, solid end to the season. I understand it kind of wraps things up in a bow, but I'm okay with that. I know there were people who criticized it for that and wished that it would have been more depressing and bleak, but I actually like the fact that it wasn't that way, because the Connors, they always kind of seem to be like that, where it looks like things are at their worst, but they find a way to stay above water and get out of things okay, and that's what happens here. It was nice to see some really tough decisions that Dan had to make, and there was some great acting by John Goodman when he just realized it's just a frustration of everything comes through, and he's in the flooded basement, and Chuck has found out about what he was going to do, and he realizes things are just he's had to go against his morals, and he hates that, and he's got this basement that's flooded, and everything's all messing up, and everything's all going to hell in a handbasket, and he grabs he got like an axe or like a tool or something and just starts bashing in one of the doors to the outside. And it was just one of those things where I thought Goodman's performance was really amazing because it really encapsulated the frustration that his character Dan was dealing with. But yeah, that's Roseanne season 10. I really don't know what else to say about the season. I've talked your ear off enough as it is. But I mean, I was expecting this to be a decently long video, because you're talking about 9 episodes. Given my thoughts on the season as a whole, I knew that was not going to be something that was going to be done in like 20-30 minutes, at least for me and how I go about things. But overall, I liked it. I thought it was a decent season. Could have been worse. Like I said, I thought it could have been funnier. It was a little bit too sporadically funny for me, and there were a lot of just really sad, depressing things in it that really were just a giant bummer. And the new cast members, they really weren't given that much to do or that much time to shine. I mean, Mark, in one of the later episodes, like I said, they go back to the cliches with these type of characters. Oh, he can't do sports because he's effeminate. I hated that. I was like, why did you go that route? It would have been better and more refreshing if it was like he was good, like he actually did score a goal, like he was actually good at soccer, and spit back all the vitriol that the kids were throwing at him for what he was wearing into their faces by just dominating. I thought that would have been better, a lot more progressive than the whole, oh, I scored a goal for the other team. It's like, come on. Like, that was just going backwards. That was very disappointing. But yeah, I mean, you could do a lot worse than this, but man, has the success of this reboot brought a new hell. A new hell is on the horizon for television, because this new I don't know if reboot's the right word, but it might as well be. This new season of an old popular show has really brought a new hell on television, because you're getting the new Murphy Brown, which I don't know why. I guess I get it because the politics, there's a lot of political stuff they can do right now. But that show, it won a lot of Emmys, and I've heard a lot about it, but I've never been able to see it because only season 1 was released on home video, and it's not available streaming anywhere. And it's one of those shows that if you are curious about it, you can't watch it legally anywhere unless you have some, like, I think like some cable channel in some other place that isn't always available for everyone. So yeah, that's coming back, and before Roseanne, you had that new season of Will and Grace, and there's just gonna be. I can see it. I can see it coming now. Networks are just gonna be like, "Hey, you remember that show? Hey, Cheers! Here's the new season of Cheers. 30 years later, like." Alf, well, bringing back Alf. Let's bring back the whole '80s primetime schedule. It's like, no, let's not do that. Like, that's just because this was a success. This was successful. I do not want to see that. Um, but like I said, at the end of the day, it's okay. It's not spectacular. A lot of the earlier seasons of the show were way better. They resonated better. They were funnier. They were more irreverent. They were more fresh. There were some stale moments to this. It was fun seeing the old gang again, and a lot of them did still have a lot of that same energy and enthusiasm, but some of them didn't, and that was a bit disappointing. And it was just one of those things that I wish it didn't focus as much in politics. And even the writers are, even the PR people for the next season are like, next season we're not going to focus that much on politics. We're going to focus more on family, on the Connor family. I mean, you better do that, because that really that was like a lead balloon for this season. Um, and definitely flesh out the ever newer characters more. Because if you're not going to do that, why are they even here? You could have just had the original cast and just have to deal with maybe Darlene thinking about having a kid, or maybe her kids are doing something else or whatever. Or, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, if you're gonna have those characters, do something more with them. And um, I also missed the soundtrack. Like, there's a little bit of the iconic theme in the intro, but there really wasn't a lot of music in this, so that was a little bit of a miss for me. I wouldn't say a little bit. I thought it was a pretty big miss. There was a lot of there were scenes in this show that I felt could have used a soundtrack, a score, and there wasn't any. Not that I remember anyway. It could be wrong. It's been a while since I've watched the episodes, but I don't remember there being that much of a score, really. And I'm not saying the score was very prevalent in the first in the first incarnation of a show, but um, it was still there, and it had this down home vibe that really fit the series well. But I would say, if you're a fan of the show and you're a fan of Roseanne, the characters and everything, I would definitely say give this a watch. And if you're not, I would probably say skip it, because it's not necessarily, it's really for the fans. And they're a big reason why this show was such a big hit. It's because there are a lot of people who wanted more. They wanted more Roseanne. They wanted to see the characters again, and to see them on a higher note. See things end on a higher note than they did in season 9. And I think that if there is one thing that this show did a good job at, and did a great job at, it is doing that. It is taking the bad taste out of fans' mouths from season 9. And that's a big thing. And but hopefully this momentum actually does lead somewhere. Like, this is not just a new series that remains stagnant. I hope that this rises above mediocrity and actually becomes a really solid, great show, like the first few seasons of the original series were. If not, it will be a wasted opportunity, but it's not going to be a total waste, because even though there are some things that I didn't like, there were still a good amount of things that I did like about this season. I'm looking forward to season 11. I'm definitely curious about it. I'll definitely check it out. And I don't really know what else to say, except thank you for watching my long-winded, in-depth review of season 10 of Roseanne. And as always, I will see you later. See ya.